Welcome everybody. My name is Becky Carter and I am the Autism and ABA lead with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and welcome to Module 5, Common Applications of Applied Behavior Analysis. So you've met my teammates so far in the first 4 modules, and we have one more module coming up after this one. So I'm Becky, the second person in the picture. And Sarah is going to talk a bit about beyond autism in her presentation. So I'm going to focus mostly about talking about commonly known applications of applied behavior analysis. Specifically, I'm going to discuss how ABA is used as an intervention for individuals with autism spectrum disorder, including as well as talking about developmental disabilities, including intellectual disability. So first, let's start and talk a little bit about what an autism spectrum disorder is. And then with a little bit of a knowledge about what autism is and what an intellectual disability are, you can start to understand why applied behavior analysis might be an effective intervention for individuals with these diagnoses. So autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental disorder. People with autism experience challenges with communication and social interaction and will display restrictive and repetitive behavior. There are many degrees of autism, so that's why we call it a spectrum, making each person really unique. But there's some commonalities. So most people living with autism will have difficulty with communication or social communication. Some individuals might not communicate verbally at all. Sometimes we call them nonverbal or minimally verbal. Children who do have language, their speech might be delayed, so they don't meet those milestones like their peers might. Or they might use speech inappropriately, so they might be echolalic, meaning that they echo or repeat words or phrases or questions when they're spoken to. Some people with autism are very well spoken, and others can have greater difficulty. So again, that spectrum. Individuals with autism also show social difficulties at an early age. So they might have difficulties with limited eye contact and might not engage well with others, or might have trouble taking turns or understanding how other people are feeling. Some people with autism might have difficulty reading the facial expressions or the body language of other people. And sometimes they might appear kind of socially aloof or not really interested in the world around them. Then we see some individuals with autism that have really restrictive and repetitive patterns of behaviors, activities, and interests. So what we notice with individuals with autism is that they have a real need for stability and routine. So making the transition from one activity to the next really, really difficult. So when you're moving from reading to math, that transition might be difficult. Or from going to different areas within the classroom. That might be a bit difficult for these individuals. They can exhibit ritualistic behavior, meaning that they want to engage in the same rituals day in and day out. So they might want to have, these are just examples, eat the exact same lunch every day, or they want to arrange toys or furniture the exact same way in the exact same place. Some individuals with autism might become obsessed with particular objects or bodies of knowledge. So I've worked with kids who might learn everything there is to know about Titanic, or remembering, baseball statistics. So they're really hyper-focused on their special interests. Although not part of the diagnosis, some individuals with autism exhibit challenging or what we call problem behavior. And Robin would have talked a lot about how we use applied behavior analysis to decrease problem behavior. What we know is that sometimes individuals with autism, they might become aggressive towards others or to themselves or to their environment. And we know when this happens, the individual is trying to communicate something to us. So that's why it's so important to know the function of their behavior, as my colleagues have talked about. So a big part of our job as a behavior analyst is to figure out what the function is, teach them a better way to communicate what they want and need. Another well-defined area where applied behavior analysis has been used is individuals with intellectual disabilities. Or ID. So ID and other developmental disabilities are characterized by impairments in adaptive areas, including social difficulties such as relating to others, or maybe they're a bit more socially immature for their age. And we also see intellectual challenges, or that's the conceptual part, so maybe slower rates of learning. We often see practical difficulties such as difficulties learning daily living or self-help skills, such as, getting dressed, getting showered, being organized, making your own lunches, that kind of thing. So have you heard my colleagues talk a lot about applied behavior analysis being evidence-based? So behavior analysts in general are huge sticklers for this very important point, as we typically only use or recommend procedures and principles that are considered evidence-based practices, or EBP for short. But really, what does that mean? The concept of evidence-based practice actually was first introduced in the field of medicine and involved a major paradigm shift from the reliance on solely clinical judgment, so what I think based on my experience and my knowledge, my education, to a real reliance on scientific research to inform our treatment decisions. This trend has since spread to many other professions and fields, including behavioral, educational, and psychosocial services, especially for those with autism. Different disciplines, whether it's medicine, psychology, speech-language pathology, will have a slightly different way in how they describe what evidence-based means, or EBP means. For some behavior analysts, an evidence-based practice can be defined as a decision-making process that combines the best available evidence, so research, combined with clinical expertise, so my experience, my knowledge, and also includes what is best for our client or student, and also takes into account the context or the environment with which the student is in. So for example, if I'm working with a student who's engaging in self-injurious behavior, meaning that they're inflicting harm on themselves. So sometimes you might see head banging or banging your head against the wall, for example. Once I determine the function of the student's self-injurious behavior, I'm going to check out the literature. So that's the best available evidence part. That's usually the first place I'm going to go and see, okay, what have others in the field done to tackle this issue? What kind of intervention plans have they developed before? I'm going to then combine that information from my research or literature review with my clinical expertise. And in that, I'm going to now adapt those procedures that I found in the literature to best fit with my student or client. And as well as keeping in mind the context, so the school system, and the resources that I have available to me. The most important place to find evidence-based procedures for a particular population is typically from articles from peer that are published in peer-reviewed journals. So this will be really important for you students that when you're in university and you're asked to conduct your first research paper on a particular topic. So where you go to find that research is really important. You may also find information published on reputable sites. So for example, in applied behavior analysis, these sites might include the Behavior Analyst Certification Board website, or on TABA, which is the Ontario Association of Applied Behavior Analysts. So I know I can trust these sites and the content that are put on these sites to use to guide me in some of my decision-making processes. Other sources of information, especially for behavior analysts, are our own direct observation of a student before treatment. So we call that baseline. So just everything being equal, how are they managing? What's their problem behavior look like? And then during treatment. So now I developed a behavior plan, I've implemented it. Do I see any changes in that behavior from baseline to treatment? So we call this a single subject design. Basically, we're only comparing one subject, one student, one client to themselves. So there's no comparison group that I'm comparing their behavior to. They're just compared to themselves. So what we're looking for, is there a change from when we implemented the treatment from before we implemented the treatment? Was the change significant? Can we say that the treatment was caused, can we say that the change was caused by that treatment or correlated, or could it have been something else? So a little note of caution. So we talked a lot about what evidence-based practice is, but let's talk about some examples of what evidence-based practice isn't. So we really want to be careful where we get our information from. Even if we say that getting research information from journal articles, we also want to keep in mind that not all journals are created equally. So we want to be careful if we're getting our information from an article published in a magazine or someone's opinion on a blog. Even if it's someone that we might respect, they may not be cued into what is evidence-based practice. Even information in a documentary or from a book, a chapter from a book. Again, sometimes these sources of information may have evidence-based information in it, but sometimes they may not. So the source, the author, and the purpose of those materials are really important when considering what's evidence-based. So let's do a ASR, so an active student responding. So which is an example of a source defined in evidence-based practice? Is it A, an excerpt from Wikipedia, B, a magazine article from Psychology Today, C, ABA blog site, or D, an article from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis? Stop and think. So if you chose D, an article from JABA, you would be correct. We want to be careful about these other sources of information when guiding our treatment decisions. So we know that applied behavior analysis is effective and that it's an evidence-based practice for individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities. But why and how do we use it for these populations? The focus of ABA with individuals with developmental disabilities and autism and ID is really to teach new skills, such as social skills, communication skills, play and leisure skills, self-help skills, and even academic skills. And those are just a few examples. We target these skills because in comparison to their same age peers, so kids of the same age or same grade, these areas might be less developed for individuals with these diagnoses. ABA can also be used to decrease problem behavior by usually teaching both alternative skills. So, Robin would have talked a lot about this when she talked about that alternative behavior pathway. So if we know that a student's engaging in problem behavior because they're trying to communicate, I don't like this work, I want to get out of here, we're going to teach an appropriate communicative response, whether it's verbal, saying, I want a break, or whether they're just showing a break sign to try to get out of that problem loop. And we're going to use these alternative skills in conjunction with other ABA strategies to decrease or eliminate altogether that problem behavior. Behavior analysts working with youth with autism and ID can be found working in hospital settings or clinical settings. So for example, CHIO has a big autism program site where they offer lots of services. And we'll talk a little bit about the type of services that they offer. They have a comprehensive ABA model. There's also many private agencies in Ottawa, for example, that offer ABA services. And we provide this applied behavior analysis in the education and school system as well. So I've talked a bit about what makes applied behavior analysis effective for this group, but a big component of ABA is the development of individual treatment packages. In other words, one ABA strategy or one behavior support plan or one treatment package doesn't fit all. With autism and other developmental disabilities being so complex and each individual so unique, an individualized treatment package plays a really key role in what makes ABA so effective, and therefore is in the effectiveness of the treatment approach to these disorders. So to put it another way, ABA provides a very clear framework to use when determining and ultimately teaching the skills that might be lacking in these individuals. As you'll see in the wheel in the slide, the ABA service delivery model that Marilyn first introduced in Module 1, we're always assessing the behaviors or skills to be taught or decreased, where we design and implement programs. And most importantly, we're continuously collecting data to evaluate the effectiveness of an intervention. Because of this, treatment is continuously altered as needed as the individual, our client or student, grows in his environment. This makes it an ideal treatment approach for autism and other developmental disabilities. So now I want to talk a little bit about some common applications of how applied behavior analysis is used with youth with autism. So the first one is naturalistic teaching strategies. So this video that I'm going to show you emphasizes how language can be shaped and facilitated through play. So natural environment teaching, or NET for short, is a loosely structured session that's, that we're following the pace and the lead of the learner or student or individual. There's no pre-specified order for instruction. Rather, you're kind of following the learner's motivation.
Towers. There's so many towers. Are you going to go over or under? Eo. Are you going to go over or under? Over? Right. Over the bridge? Is it working out? Yay! You did make it through. That's impressive. You made it out. So you're going to climb this tower and go down the dragon? Okay. That's you, huh? Do you need help? No. Okay. If you need help, just say help. The poop come right here. This way. Yep. I can see you. Yep. Yep. Dragon eye. If you go this way, you'll be in the dragon's back. Yep. Ride the dragon's back.
Okay, so you got a sense that there wasn't a script of exactly what was being taught, but the caregiver or mother or therapist was following that child's lead, and increasing that child's language skills, for example. So I'm going to show you another example of discrete trial teaching, or DTT for short, which is another common ABA application that we use when teaching individuals with autism. So discrete trial teaching is very explicit teaching, and we have teaching skills in a very discrete basic behaviors. So with DTT, an instruction is given, a response occurs, and then reinforcement or feedback is given. So think of that ABC paradigm that we've talked about, that my colleagues have talked about. So A, the antecedent instruction is given. B, the learner responds, so that's the behavior. And C, a consequence is delivered, so a praise, for example. The premise behind DTT is increasing opportunities for repeated instruction, modeling, and feedback and reinforcement. So the goal is to take these skills and then generalize them to other environments and settings where the skills, outside of where the skills are explicitly taught. In DTT, oftentimes they're taught, we call them kind of tabletop. So they're taught sitting at a table ready to learn. So I'm going to go over and play the video.
Gray. Very good. What's that? It's a fire truck. Circle the gray one. Nice job. What is it? It's a mouse. Circle the gray picture. Very good. What is that? A corn. It's a corn. Nice job. I'm done. Okay.
All right, let's get back moving again. And I'm going to give you another example of how you might see ABA within an education setting. So active student responding is one of those examples. So a classroom using this technique uses this to increase participation and decrease disruption. So there's lots of information about what active student responding is, and this video clip just shows a little bit of what we call choral responding, but it's part of a bigger kind of application where we're measuring individual progress. We're using guided notes, response charts, and the benefit of this is that it allows consistent and continuous informal measurement of how the students are understanding and responding to what is being taught in the classroom. So the teacher would have an easy and kind of fun method to continuously guide how their students are reacting and understanding the content of material. So this video is going to show choral responding. So watch for the teacher to ask a question and then cue or gesture to when the students respond. So all the students are going to respond in unison. So this is a really good way to increase engagement. And also for some students who may not know the content as well, they're not being singled out.
When I go like this, you guys are good at answering. This is pretty good, okay? Short club. Cognitive analysis is for children with autism only. False. Cognitive analysis and evidence-based treatment for children with autism. Punishment needs to be proven for school the child. False. Control is one function of behavior. False. Good. ABA is effective for decreasing problem behavior. True. ABA is effective for improving academic performance. True. ABA should only be done at a tabletop. False. ABA is a new science. False. ABA is effective only for young children. False. Last one, ABA is supported by the U.S. Surgeon General. Nice.
Okay. So an active ASR for you. So why is ABA a good fit for individuals with autism and intellectual disabilities? ABA provides a framework for identifying and teaching skills that may have been lacking. B, ABA service delivery model supports individual programming with ongoing assessment and monitoring. C, ABA is evidence-based practice. Or D, all of the above. Stop and think. So that's right, D, all of the above. And one last concept I wanted to introduce you to is how much ABA is enough? And this is a really tough question with a tough answer. A simple answer would be until you see the desired change that you want to see. In other words, until you've taught all the skills the student needs and eliminated all of the problem behavior that's interfering with their learning or for them to access things that they find reinforcing. In ABA, we can kind of divide this answer into two camps. We have focused applied behavior analysis as well as comprehensive applied behavior analysis. I'll talk about focus first. Focused ABA might range from, if I had to put hours on it, 10 to 25 hours a week of direct treatment or implementation of a behavior support plan. However, certain programs for severe behavior might require more time and effort. These interventions tend to be to address a specific skill or a few skills. Maybe it's to address communication skills or social skills or daily living skills, like a toilet training program, for example, or behavioral challenges. I'm going to write a plan to decrease a particular problem behavior that we're seeing. The interventions might be used with the individual at any age and can take a place in all those settings we talked about earlier, the schools or clinics. The goal is that they tend to be time sensitive. So you implement the program until the goal is reached, until the child has learned to use the bathroom independently, or until the problem behavior has decreased and you've taught a alternative behavior to that. As behavior analysts, we tend to do focus applied behavior analysis in schools. That's what you're going to see. Comprehensive applied behavior analysis are typically really intensive. So they might be upwards of 35 hours a week and really comprehensive in terms of targeting a number of goals or number of skills at the same time. They generally use a broad curriculum, so targeting the communication, self-help, social skills. And you see this more in centers or clinical settings. So it's not an easy question to answer, but these are kind of the two areas where how we define applied behavior analysis. So you have focused treatment or comprehensive treatment. So that is all that we have for module number 5. I really enjoyed my time with you guys today, and stay tuned for now taking applied behavior analysis beyond autism and developmental disabilities. Sarah Print is going to talk about that more next. Bye, everybody.